They said Nuru City never sleeps, but that night, even its streetlights seemed to tremble. At the Golden Orchid Hotel, where the rich drank power and called it champagne, one act of cruelty would set the city ablaze. Nancy Okafor, daughter of a market woman, lawyer by grit, stood drenched in shame before men who thought money could wash away sin. Chief Barakanwodo's laughter echoed across the pool like thunder before a storm. He thought her voice was small. He was wrong, because that night, Nuru City itself would remember her name. In Nuru City, wealth was worshipped like a god. It lived in glass towers, spoke through tinted windows, and ate from gold-plated plates while the streets below starved. Nancy Okafor walked those streets every morning, briefcase in hand, eyes bright with conviction. Born in the slums of Ajagunla district, she had clawed her way from hunger to the courtroom. To some she was a symbol of hope, to others a threat. But to herself, she was simply her mother's dream made flesh. A woman who believed justice was not a privilege but a birthright. The city, however, did not forgive dreamers, especially ones who dared to challenge its gods. Her path crossed with Reginald Mensah, a tech entrepreneur who had risen from the dusty back streets of Kumasi to build Mensah Tech, one of Africa's fastest-growing companies. Reginald's clean reputation was an anomaly in a city rotting with corruption. While others bribed their way to success, he built his empire with innovation and integrity, two currencies the elite found amusing but naive. Their worlds collided when Nancy took on a landmark discrimination case against Nwodo Holdings, the empire owned by Chief Barakanwodo, the most feared man in Nuru City. His face graced magazines and billboards, the lion of African capitalism. Yet behind that smile hid a predator's heart. His factories bled their workers dry. His real estate company built walls, not homes. And his social events, lavish charity galas, were temples to hypocrisy, where the powerful washed their sins with wine. Nancy knew the risk of going against him. She had seen what happened to those who tried. Bankrupt lawyers, vanished journalists, silenced activists. But when a young construction worker named Tomi Adewale died under unsafe conditions at one of Nwodo's sites, and his family was bribed into silence, Nancy refused to look away. "It's not just a case," she told Reginald during a coffee meeting. "It's a chance to remind this city that the poor bleed the same red as the rich." Reginald watched her, her fire, her trembling hands, her certainty that truth could still win. He saw in her the courage he once had before boardrooms and deals dulled his idealism. "You'll make enemies," he warned softly. "I already have." She smiled. "Poverty was my first." Their friendship grew from respect into quiet affection, their shared battles against a system that thrived on silence. When Chief Baraka learned that Nancy was leading the case, he didn't rage, he laughed. "An Ajagunle girl wants to lecture me about justice?" He scoffed to his board. "We'll crush her spirit before she even reaches court." He invited her to his annual charity gala at the Golden Orchid Hotel, the same event where he donated millions for the poor while underpaying them in secret. It was both an olive branch and a trap. "You see, Ms. Okafor," the invitation read, "we don't have to be enemies. Let's discuss peace over wine," Reginald advised caution. "Baraka doesn't make peace," he warned. "He buys it." But Nancy went anyway, not out of pride, but purpose. She knew that when power calls you to its table, it's better to face it in light than in shadow. The night of the gala shimmered with pretense. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers like captured stars. Guests in sequined dresses laughed in rehearsed tones. Champagne flowed like gossip. When Nancy entered, silence rippled through the crowd. Some whispered her name like an insult, others like a prayer. Her blue Ankara gown, simple yet bold, made her stand out among the glittering sea of European couture. She carried herself like a woman who knew her worth could not be measured in carats. Chief Baraka spotted her instantly, tall, broad, dressed in white agbada embroidered with gold. His smile was charming, his eyes cold. "Ah, the famous Nancy Okafor," he said, extending a hand heavy with rings. "The voice of the voiceless. Welcome to my kingdom." Nancy met his gaze steadily. "I didn't come to admire it, Chief. I came to understand why so many suffer beneath it." For a moment their eyes locked, the lion and the lamb. But beneath her calm, Nancy felt the tension of being surrounded by predators in silk. Hours passed, filled with speeches about charity and equality, hollow words floating over polished marble. Then came the moment that would change everything. Chief Baraka raised his glass for a toast. "To the power of progress," he boomed. "To the dreamers who know their place in society and stay there." Laughter erupted, polite, empty. Nancy's jaw tightened. But before she could move, one of Baraka's associates, drunk and arrogant, whispered loudly, "Accept our dear Nancy. She dreams above her station." Baraka smiled cruelly, his voice dripping with mockery. Perhaps Ms. Okafor needs a reminder of where she belongs. Before anyone could react, he flicked his wrist, and with a shove, Nancy stumbled backward. Crashing into the swimming pool behind her, gasps filled the air. Water exploded upward, drenching the marble floor as her body sank beneath the surface. Bones came out. Laughter mixed with shock, and from the edge of the crowd a voice thundered, low, furious, unstoppable. Get away from her. It was Reginald Mensah. The night Nauru City would never forget had just begun. The courtroom in Nauru High Court smelled of polish and power. Ceiling fans turned lazily above the crowd. Journalists, activists, government aides, and curious citizens pressed shoulder to shoulder. The case of Nancy Okafor versus Nwodo Holdings had become more than a lawsuit. It was a mirror reflecting the soul of the city. Outside, protesters held placards. "Justice for Kwesi. No one is above the law." But for every voice shouting justice, there was another whispering fear. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Chief Baraka Nwodo sat in his tailored white agbada, gold cufflinks glinting, his composure unshaken. Beside him, his lawyers scrolled through tablets filled with years of manipulation. Nancy stood at her wooden table, no fancy jewelry, no bodyguards, just her old leather briefcase and the fire in her eyes. The judge cleared his throat.
"Counselor Okafor, you may proceed." Nancy stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp.
"Your Honor, we bring before this court not merely an industrial negligence case, but a matter of human dignity. The evidence will show that the factory owned by Nwodo Holdings knowingly dumped chemical waste into the river Eco, poisoning communities and leading to the death of a young worker, Mr. Kwesi Ndlovu, Baraka's lead attorney. A polished man named Mr. Adigan rose with a smirk. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is already giving a sermon." The judge nodded. "Sustained. Stick to the facts, Ms. Okafor." Nancy nodded respectfully and continued. "The facts are simple. Mr. Ndlovu discovered illegal dumping, documented it, and attempted to report it. 3 days later, he was found dead inside a chemical tank. The company labeled it an accident, but the security footage, conveniently erased, tells another story." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Cameras flashed. Nancy turned, her eyes meeting Baraka's. "Your Honor, this is not about business. It is about power, and what happens when power forgets humanity." Baraka chuckled softly, his gold rings tapping the table. "Young lady," he murmured under his breath, "you are playing with thunder." Nancy didn't flinch. "Thunder can't harm the truth, Chief. It only makes it louder." That night, in the gleaming penthouse of Nwodo Towers, Chief Baraka held a private meeting with his inner circle. The Council of Seven, a group of businessmen, politicians, and a judge whose loyalty was secured by briefcases of cash. "Gentlemen," Baraka said, swirling brandy in a crystal glass, "this girl is gaining too much attention. My name is trending for the wrong reasons." A portly man, the Minister of Industry, leaned forward nervously. "Chief, we've already arranged for the environmental report to disappear." Baraka's smile was cold. "Good, but the real problem is not the case. It's her. She's too clean to be bought." Another man, one of Baraka's PR aides, spoke cautiously. "We could leak a scandal. Something about her background, her family." Baraka raised a hand. "No, we will not smear her. We will break her." He turned to a silent figure in the corner. Mr. Luda, his fixer. "You know what to do." Quietly. Luda nodded once and left the room. As the elevator doors closed, Baraka gazed out over Nauru City. "They call me a god," he whispered. "Then let her learn what happens when mortals challenge gods." Across town, Reginald Mensah sat in his dim office, a single lamp casting light over scattered documents. He had spent the entire evening tracing financial records, and what he found chilled him. One of his company's subsidiaries, SolarPath, had unknowingly received investments funneled from Nwodo Holdings He leaned back, exhaling sharply. So that's how he's inside my house. He couldn't sleep. The faces of the factory workers haunted him. The children drinking poisoned water. The river turned black. He remembered the anonymous message from Nancy and opened it again. Her words echoed, "When good men stay silent, evil writes the laws." He stood, pacing. "If I pull out now, my board will revolt. If I speak up, Baraka will crush me." His assistant Io entered quietly. "Sir, the news is everywhere. They're calling her the Lioness of Nauru." Reginald looked at the screen, Nancy's face on the courthouse steps, speaking to reporters. "We are not afraid," she said. "Let justice be our only weapon," Reginald whispered. "And what happens when justice is outnumbered?" Io hesitated. "Sir, sometimes one voice can start a riot." Reginald stared out at the sleeping city. "Then maybe it's time I stopped being quiet." 2 nights later, Nancy returned home after another grueling court session. Her mother had fallen asleep on the couch, the TV still glowing. She placed a blanket over her and smiled softly. But when she entered her room, she froze. Her files were gone. Her laptop was open. The window latch was broken. On the floor lay a single sheet of paper, blank, except for a line written in red marker. "Stop digging." The dead should stay buried. Nancy's hands trembled. She picked up her phone to call her colleague, but before she could dial, the screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. "They're watching you." Her heartbeat thundered. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and leaned against the wall. But fear didn't stay long. It turned to fire. She whispered to herself, "If they are watching, let them see me win." The next morning, Nancy presented new evidence. A leaked document proving that Nwodo Holdings had falsified environmental reports for 3 consecutive years. Baraka's attorney immediately objected. "This evidence is inadmissible." "It was obtained illegally," Nancy countered. "Truth has no expiry date, Your Honor. The people deserve to know." The judge sighed. "Proceed." Baraka's calm cracked for the first time. His jaw tightened. He leaned toward his lawyer. "Find out who gave her that file." In the audience, Reginald watched silently. He had slipped into the courtroom unnoticed, wearing a cap and plain clothes. He knew that file. He was the one who had sent it anonymously to Nancy after discovering it in his company archives. As Nancy spoke, her voice filled the room with conviction. Chief Baraka Nwodo's factories have not only killed rivers, they have killed dreams, they have stolen futures. This is not just pollution of land, but of conscience. The crowd erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel. "Order, order!" Baraka stood abruptly. "You are accusing me of murder?" Nancy met his gaze. "If the shoe fits, Chief, then wear it, no matter how expensive." Baraka's face darkened. "You think you can shame me in front of my people? You don't know who you're dealing with." Nancy smiled faintly. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who thinks money can silence ghosts." For a moment, the entire courtroom went still. Even the judge lowered his eyes. Later that evening, Reginald received a call. "Mr. Mensah, Chief Baraka wants to see you, privately." He hesitated, then agreed. At Nwodo Towers, the air was thick with arrogance and expensive cologne. Baraka greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Reginald," he said, "you're a smart man. You know this girl, Nancy Okafor, is bad for business. Her noise is scaring investors. I want you to speak to her. Convince her to withdraw." Reginald's jaw tightened. "And if she refuses?" Baraka poured him a drink. "Then we will remind her how fragile life can be. Accidents happen in Nauru City every day." Reginald froze. "Are you threatening her?" Baraka chuckled. "Threatening? No, my boy. I'm simply protecting my empire. The same empire that keeps men like you rich." Reginald set the glass down slowly. "Chief, I didn't build my company on silence. I built it on truth." Baraka's smile vanished. "Then you've chosen the wrong side." As Reginald turned to leave, Baraka added coldly, "Remember, in this city, even angels fall when they fly too high." The next morning, the story exploded across every major news outlet. Top businessman leaks evidence against Nwodo Holdings. Reginald Mensah's name was trending. His company stocks plummeting, and his board demanding answers. Baraka was furious. He slammed his phone against the wall. "That traitor. He'll regret the day he crossed me." He ordered his men to dig into Reginald's past, to find anything that could destroy him. Meanwhile, Nancy arrived at court to find a crowd chanting her name. "Nancy! Nancy!" "Justice for Kwesi." But she knew the battle had only begun. Behind the cheers lurked enemies she couldn't see, and one powerful man who was not done fighting. That evening, Nancy stood by the riverside where Kwesi had died. The water shimmered under the setting sun, still poisoned, still silent. She whispered a prayer. "I don't know if I'll win, Kwesi, but they will remember your name." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. Reginald stood there, tired but resolute. "I was the one who sent you the files," he said softly. "And I'm not afraid anymore," Nancy nodded, a small, grateful smile forming. Then maybe justice just found its ally. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the city. Cars, horns, and distant voices, as though Nuru itself was listening. For the first time in years, Nancy felt hope, fragile but alive. But somewhere high above the city, Chief Barakanwodo watched from his balcony, his phone pressed to his ear. "Prepare the next move," he said coldly. "If they want a war, I'll give them one." The line clicked. Lightning flashed in the distance. The battle for Nuru City had only begun. Nuru City glowed like molten gold beneath the night sky, but in its veins ran whispers of fear. Ever since the leak, every radio station, newsfeed, and street corner argument revolved around one name, Chief Barakanwodo. Some called him corrupt. Others swore he was the city's backbone. Truth and lies had started their race, and both ran fast. 2 days after Reginald's revelation, the first blow came quietly. A trending headline appeared on Pulse Nuru: Nancy Okafor, hero or hypocrite. Exclusive evidence links lawyer to foreign donors. Photoshopped bank slips flooded social media. A voice recording, fabricated, claimed she'd accepted money from foreign agents trying to destabilize local industry. Within hours, bots and fake profiles filled comment sections. "She's paid to embarrass our leaders." Typical, using the people's pain to chase fame. Nancy scrolled through her phone in disbelief. Her mother looked up from the kitchen table. "My child, they are attacking you?" Nancy forced a smile. "It means they're afraid." But later, alone, she felt the walls closing in. Her sponsors withdrew. One of her witnesses recanted, terrified. Meanwhile, Baraka sat in his mansion, a smirk playing on his lips. "Perception, gentlemen," he told his advisors, "is the new truth. If they doubt her, they'll forget the case." He leaned back. "Next, we will silence the ally." Reginald Mensah arrived at his office to find chaos. Board members shouted over each other. Reporters waited outside. "Reginald, you've destroyed our reputation." One investor barked. Another waved a document. "Chief Baraka is suing you for defamation." Reginald dropped into his chair, exhaustion etched across his face. His assistant, Io, whispered, "Sir, they froze the accounts. Someone hacked our servers." He looked at the city skyline. This is how corruption fights, not with bullets, but with ruin. That evening, as he left the building, a black SUV screeched beside him. 2 men stepped out. One handed him a sealed envelope and muttered, "From the chief." Inside, a single note: "Every empire has its king. Kneel and your crown stays." Reginald tore the paper to pieces. But deep down, fear began to gnaw at him. 3 nights later, Nancy returned to her small office to find someone waiting in the dark. Luda. "Baraka's fixer, Miss Okafor," he said smoothly. "The chief asked me to deliver a message." He placed a brown envelope on her desk. "Inside is 20 million naira. Enough to start a new life somewhere far from Nuru." Nancy didn't touch it. "And what does he want in return?" "Just your silence," she smiled faintly. "Tell your chief I don't sell truth by the kilogram." Luda's expression hardened. "Then perhaps you'll sell fear. You have a mother, yes? She still lives near old Nuru?" Nancy rose, eyes blazing. "Leave now." He chuckled as he turned away. "The chief always collects his debts." When he left, she locked the door and sank into her chair, trembling. For the first time, she wept, not for herself, but for her mother. Days later, rain hammered Nuru City as the next hearing began. Nancy walked into court drenched, clutching soaked files. Her colleague whispered, "The witness changed his statement again. He says Kwesi's death was accidental." Nancy's chest tightened. Another betrayal. She stood anyway. "Your Honor, I request that the court summon the company's safety officer, Mr. Osei Badu." Baraka's lawyers exchanged nervous glances. Mr. Badu was missing. Nancy continued, "We believe he fled because he fears for his life." Baraka slammed a palm on the table. "Lies! You insult this court with drama!" Nancy turned slowly. Drama? Tell that to Kwesi's mother, who buried her son without knowing why. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Outside, thunder cracked. Nature's own gavel. That night, Reginald sat with AO reviewing backup data from the hacked servers. Hidden in a folder labeled Charity Projects, they found invoices, millions in payments to fake NGOs, shell companies, and an untraceable account tied to Badu Enterprises. AO frowned. Sir, Badu, isn't that the missing officer? Reginald nodded. He's not missing. He's being hidden. They printed the files and encrypted digital copies. I'll take this to Nancy, Reginald said. AO hesitated. Sir, after everything, your company's collapse, your life threats. Reginald smiled weakly. If I stay silent, I become him. On his way to Nancy's office, Reginald's car was intercepted near the river bridge. Two masked men emerged, guns glinting under streetlights. Give us the drive, one hissed. Reginald accelerated. Tires screamed. A bullet shattered the rear window. He swerved, heart pounding, until a police siren blared. The attackers vanished into alleys. Shaken but alive, he arrived at Nancy's building, blood trickling from a cut on his arm. She gasped, helping him inside. You could have died. He handed her the flash drive. Then don't let it be for nothing. When she opened the files, her breath caught a proof of systematic bribery connecting Baraka to half the city's elite. Nancy whispered. This could end him. Reginald looked away. Or end us. The next morning, Nancy submitted the documents to court under sealed evidence. But before the hearing began, the judge, the same one rumored to attend Baraka's secret meetings, announced, This evidence cannot be admitted. Its source is compromised. Nancy froze. Your Honor, on what grounds? The judge avoided her gaze. National security concerns. Baraka's lips curled into a satisfied grin. Outside, Reginald confronted Nancy. They've bought the court. She clenched her fists. Then we take it to the people. But that evening, another blow struck. Baraka's media empire released a secret video showing Nancy and Reginald together late at night, twisted into a scandal of romantic corruption. Within hours, their reputations burned. Sponsors fled, protesters dispersed. Even Nancy's mother received threats. Reginald slammed his laptop shut. He's destroying everything. Nancy stared at the wall, silent. Then she whispered, Let him burn my name. Justice doesn't need fame. It needs proof. At midnight, a knock echoed at Nancy's apartment. She opened the door to find Mr. Badu, pale, trembling, eyes darting. Please. I can't run anymore, he whispered. They tried to kill me. I have recordings. Nancy ushered him in. He played an audio file, Baraka's voice ordering, Make it look like an accident. No one must trace the river spill. Tears welled in Nancy's eyes. This is it. This is the truth. But before dawn, police cars surrounded her building. Officers stormed in and arrested them both. The charge, tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice. As she was handcuffed, Nancy looked toward the sky. So this is what justice costs. Reginald rushed to the station demanding her release, but was denied access. In frustration, he went live on social media, a trembling, heartfelt broadcast that spread like wildfire. He held up Baraka's leaked documents and Badu's audio file. My name is Reginald Mensah, he said. If I disappear tonight, know that Chief Baraka Nwodo controls this city's justice. But know this too. Truth has left his walls and entered your hands. He uploaded everything to the public domain. Within minutes, the files went viral. Across Nuru City, people flooded the streets chanting, We see you, Baraka! We see you! News anchors replayed the audio. Opposition leaders called for Baraka's arrest. The police, caught between public rage and political command, had no choice but to release Nancy. The next day, Baraka called an emergency press conference. He appeared calm, flanked by lawyers. These recordings are fabrications. I have served this nation for decades, but as he spoke, a new video appeared online, live footage from inside his own security archive, showing him ordering Luda to erase the boy. The clip had been released by none other than Luda himself. Cornered by the protests, Baraka had refused to pay his fixer's final demand. In betrayal, Luda turned on him. Baraka's composure cracked on live TV. He tried to leave the stage, but police intercepted him. Nuru City exploded with cheers. In the crowd, Nancy stood beside Reginald, exhausted but triumphant. He looked at her, voice soft. You fought gods and didn't bow. Nancy smiled through tears. Even gods fall when the people stand. That night the city was strangely quiet. Nancy walked home past murals already appearing on walls, her face painted beside words. Truth walks, barefoot. She met her mother at the door. "Mama, we did it," she whispered. Her mother held her tight. "No, child, Nuru did it. You just reminded us how." Reginald arrived later with news. Baraka had been taken into custody. Assets frozen. The corrupt judge suspended. But he also carried a heavy truth. "Ayo, they found him. He was attacked." Nancy's smile faded. "He helped save us." Reginald nodded. "He believed in the same light you do." They stood together on the balcony, watching dawn rise over Nuru, a city scarred but awakening. As sunlight spilled over rooftops, Nancy addressed a crowd outside the courthouse. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with conviction. "We fought a man who thought he owned justice, but justice belongs to no man. It belongs to the people. It may walk slow, but it never loses direction." Applause thundered through the square. Reginald stepped forward, taking her hand. "What now?" he asked. Nancy looked toward the river, cleaner now, its surface reflecting the morning light. "Now," she said softly, "we rebuild. And we remember that truth, once spoken, never dies. It only changes its listeners." When the storm clears, even trees must count their broken branches. The courtroom in Nuru City had never felt so heavy. It was as if the walls themselves held their breath. Journalists filled every bench. Cameras whispered like restless spirits, and across every home screen, the nation watched history unfold. For months, the people versus Baraka Nwodo had gripped the country like a fever. Some called Nancy Okafor the voice of Africa's conscience. Others said she was naive, that one woman could not uproot a forest of corruption. But Nancy never saw herself as a hero. She saw herself as a daughter of truth, and daughters, in her mother's words, do not rest while their motherland bleeds. "Court is in session," announced Judge Amadi, a man known for his calm tone and unpredictable verdicts. He adjusted his glasses as Chief Baraka entered, surrounded by guards and lawyers who looked more like diplomats than defenders. Baraka's smile never faltered. Even in chains, his presence radiated command. His suit was immaculate, his gold wristwatch gleaming under the courtroom lights, as if to remind everyone that wealth still glittered, even under accusation. Nancy sat across from him, her files meticulously arranged. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. Weeks of late nights, endless threats, and the whispers of betrayal within her own team had begun to take their toll. Reginald Mensah sat behind her in the gallery, silently watching. His company had lost major contracts ever since he publicly supported her cause. Investors had fled, sponsors had withdrawn, and his family had begged him to step away. But he stayed. He couldn't explain why. Not to them, not even to himself. Something about Nancy's fire reminded him of the man he once promised to be before success dulled his edges. As the prosecutor, Nancy began her opening argument. "Your Honor, this is not merely about a corporation's crime. This is about a man who believed he was beyond the reach of humanity, who sold the future of our children for gold. Chief Baraka Nwodo must answer for every drop of poison his empire poured into our rivers, and every soul silenced for daring to speak." Baraka chuckled quietly, leaning toward his attorney. "She speaks well," he whispered. "But passion doesn't pay judges." The first witnesses were called. Factory workers who described the dumping of chemicals, victims who showed photographs of their burned skin and diseased livestock. Each testimony added a new wound to the city's heart, but Baraka's defense struck back with precision. They questioned, confused, and humiliated. They painted Nancy as a fame-seeker, a woman manipulated by rivals. "How can you prove intent?" one of the defense lawyers demanded. "Do you have direct evidence that Chief Nwodo ordered this?" For a moment, silence. Nancy's mind raced. The evidence they had was circumstantial. They needed something concrete, something undeniable. Then Reginald rose from the gallery. "Your Honor," he said, voice firm, "I have evidence." Gasps filled the room. He handed over a flash drive, internal memos from Solar Path Technologies, showing money transfers from Baraka's shell companies to government officials, coded as community donations. Attached was a report he had discovered. A classified communication between Baraka's security head and the factory manager, confirming the cover-up of Kwesi and Lovu's death. Nancy looked at him, stunned, grateful and afraid all at once. That night, the world changed. News headlines screamed, "Tech mogul turns whistleblower. Baraka empire exposed." Nancy Okafor's case gains new life. But victory had a price. Within hours, Reginald's offices were raided under tax violations. His accounts were frozen. His employees were questioned, some even arrested. Anonymous threats poured in. Nancy found him sitting alone in a dark office, his tie undone, his phone buzzing non-stop. "You knew this would happen," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "But I didn't know it would feel like this." She smiled faintly. Justice doesn't come cheap in Nuru City. He looked at her then. Really looked. "And yet you keep paying for it." Their silence spoke louder than words. Two souls burning for a truth that might consume them both. As the trial gained momentum, something shifted. Key witnesses began disappearing. Files went missing. A journalist investigating Baraka's offshore accounts was found dead in his car. Nancy's assistant, a quiet young man named Tega, stopped coming to work. Days later, she discovered why. He had been bought. Her confidential case notes were leaked to the defense. Her trust cracked like glass. When she confronted Tega, he fell to his knees, weeping. "They threatened my family, madam. I didn't want to. But they showed me my mother's house." They said they'd burn it. Nancy felt her anger dissolve into grief. She dismissed him without another word. That night, as she drove home, a black SUV followed her through the empty streets. Her car was forced off the road. Men stepped out, faces masked, voices cold. "Withdraw the case," one said, pressing a gun to her window. "You've done enough. Go back to your mother before she has to bury you." Nancy didn't answer. Her heart pounded, but she refused to look away. "Tell Chief Nwodo," she said, voice trembling but steady, "that I don't scare easy. My father died fixing his cars. I will not die fixing his conscience." They left her with a broken windshield and a warning carved into her car door. Silence is survival. When Reginald saw the car, his fury burned through his calm. "He's crossing lines now," he said. "We need to hit back." Nancy shook her head. "No, we win this in court, not in the streets." But Reginald wasn't listening. Chief Baraka, now cornered, moved like a wounded lion, dangerous and unpredictable. He bribed witnesses, blackmailed politicians, and unleashed a media campaign calling Nancy and Reginald agents of foreign influence. He even appeared on national television, his voice smooth, his charm intoxicating. "I have built this city. I have fed it poorly. Now I am being punished for success. Let the people decide who their real enemy is." And the people did divide. Some believed Nancy. Others saw her as the destroyer of jobs. Riots broke out near the factory district. Nancy's mother's stall was burned in the chaos. When Nancy arrived, she found her mother sitting amid the ashes, clutching her burned kettle. "They can burn my Zobo, child," she said softly. "But they cannot burn your purpose." Nancy broke down, her tears mixing with soot and smoke. Reginald stood beside her, silent, guilt heavy in his chest, because he had learned something that day, something he hadn't told Nancy. Baraka's lawyers had found a loophole in his testimony. If they proved Reginald's company once collaborated with Nwodo Holdings, his credibility as a whistleblower would collapse, and Nancy's entire case with it. And it was true. Years ago, before Reginald knew the depth of Nwodo's crimes, he had partnered with one of Baraka's shell firms for a government project. He had signed the contract himself. Baraka now had the papers, and he intended to use them. 2 days before the final hearing, a news leak exploded across social media. Reginald Mensah, complicated in Nwodo empire laundering. Nancy's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Protesters surrounded the courthouse calling her case a fraud. Sponsors withdrew their support. When she confronted Reginald, he didn't deny it. "It's true," he said quietly. "I didn't know who owned the company back then. But I should have." Nancy's voice cracked. "Do you realize what this means?" "Everything we fought for." "I know," he said, looking away. "But if you must let me fall to save the case, then let me fall." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain beat against the glass like 1,000 restless hearts. Then Nancy stepped closer. You once told me justice doesn't come cheap. Now you're paying for it, he smiled faintly. And so are you. That night, Nancy stood alone at her desk, staring at her reflection in the dark window, her face tired, her eyes full of ghosts. She could drop him from the case, protect her reputation, and still win, or she could stand beside him and lose everything. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice again. Child, the world doesn't need perfect heroes. It needs honest ones. When dawn broke, her decision was made. The next morning, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. The air crackled with tension. Judge Amati entered. The murmurs died. Cameras rolled. Nancy rose. Your Honor, she began, it has come to light that my witness, Mr. Reginald Mensah, once engaged in business with one of the accused's companies. This was unknown to him at the time, but rather than hide it, we bring it to light, because truth, even when it wounds, is stronger than lies. Gasps. Baraka's lawyers exchanged triumphant smiles, but before they could speak, Nancy turned sharply toward Baraka. Chief Nwodo, she said, voice ringing through the hall, you build your empire on fear. You buy silence, you own men's names, and you think truth can be buried. But I have learned something you never will. When justice stands with clean hands, even blood cannot stain it. The courtroom roared. Reginald bowed his head, humbled by her courage. Baraka's mask finally cracked. For the first time, his smile vanished. The judge adjourned the session for final deliberations. Outside, the crowd surged, chanting Nancy's name, but inside, Nancy knew, whether they won or lost tomorrow. The real victory had already been claimed. They had forced the city to look into its own soul. When the lion falls, even the grass remembers his weight. The morning of the verdict, Nuru City awoke to a silence that felt sacred. The streets that once echoed with chaos were still. Market women paused their sales. Bus drivers lowered their radios, and across every screen, one image glowed, the marble facade of the High Court of Nuru State. Inside, every breath felt like a prayer. Nancy Okafor stood at the plaintiff's table, her black robe pressed but her eyes weary. She had not slept in 2 nights. Behind her, Reginald Mensah sat quietly, his face calm but pale, a man who had walked through fire and accepted its scars. Across the courtroom, Chief Baraka Nwodo arrived, flanked by his remaining lawyers. Fewer now, their arrogance dulled by exhaustion. Baraka's once sparkling cufflinks caught the morning light, but his eyes were darker, clouded by something he could not name. The weight of a kingdom crumbling. The murmurs died as Judge Amati entered. His expression was unreadable, a mask carved from patience and years of knowing how fragile truth could be. After months of testimony, evidence and deliberation, Judge Amati began. This court has reached its verdict. A pause. The kind that stretched across the air like a bowstring. Chief Baraka Nwodo, the court finds you guilty on the counts of corporate negligence, environmental destruction, and obstruction of justice. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in correctional custody, and all illegal assets are to be seized and returned for public restoration of the affected communities. The room erupted. Reporters surged forward. Victims wept openly. Some shouted, "Justice," while others fell to their knees, clutching one another. Baraka stood motionless, then laughed, a low, hollow sound that silenced the chaos. "You think this changes anything?" he said, his voice cold. "Do you know how many men like me there are? You can cage me, but not the system." Nancy met his gaze. "You're right," she said softly. "But every wall begins to fall with one crack." For a fleeting moment, Baraka's expression faltered. He looked at her, the daughter of a mechanic, and saw the end of an age he had once ruled. As officers led him away, he turned one last time toward Reginald. "You," he said, almost whispering, "you could have joined me." Reginald replied quietly, "And rot with you." "No, Chief, I've seen enough graves built from gold." Baraka's smirk vanished as the doors shut behind him. By evening, Nuru City was alive again, not with fear this time, but with a strange kind of lightness. People danced in the streets. Vendors gave away free food in celebration. Across radios and TV screens, Nancy's name echoed like a song. In Old Nuru, where the river once ran black with factory waste, the people lit candles by the banks. A banner hung from a bridge, to Kwesi Ndlovu, to the truth that finally found daylight. Reginald walked beside Nancy through the crowd. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a plain white shirt, her hair tied back. The people cheered as she passed, some bowing their heads, others touching her hands as if she were a blessing. But Nancy's eyes stayed distant. "You look sad," Reginald said softly. "I'm not," she replied. "Just empty. I thought victory would feel heavier, louder. But it's quiet," he nodded, "because real justice doesn't celebrate. It heals slowly." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my mother." Days later, news spread of the collapse of Nwodo Holdings. Government audits exposed hidden bank accounts. Mansions and luxury cars were seized. Ministers once proud to call him brother now denied ever shaking his hand. But power, like poison, lingers. Even behind bars, Baraka managed to send messages, bribes offered, threats whispered. Some guards accepted, some refused. Yet for the first time in his life, Baraka's words did not move mountains. They fell into silence. One night in his cell, he stared at his reflection in a cracked mirror. His hands trembled. He whispered to the emptiness, "I built cities, and they still hate me." A voice from the next cell, a street thief, chuckled. "You built graves, old man. Cities just came free." Baraka said nothing after that. In time, the world forgot him, except for the families who now lived near clean water, and the young lawyers who studied Nancy's case as a turning point in African justice. Victory, however, came with its ghosts. Nancy's firm was suspended temporarily pending a government inquiry, an administrative check instigated by Baraka's allies. Sponsors withdrew. Clients vanished. Her name, though celebrated, became dangerous currency in certain circles. Reginald lost nearly half his company's value, and many of his investors abandoned him. Yet he refused to file bankruptcy. "We'll rebuild," he told his remaining team. Honesty is slow capital, but it never goes bankrupt. Still, there were nights when both Nancy and Reginald sat alone, wondering if the price had been too high. One such night, Nancy visited the graves of her father and Kwesi and Lovu. The wind smelled of rain. She knelt, placing a white rose on the soil. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "But sometimes I wonder if justice ever really wins, or just survives." Behind her, footsteps approached. Reginald. He carried 2 candles, shielding their flames from the wind. "You know," he said, setting one by Kwesi's name. "My mother used to say, when you wrestle darkness, even your shadow learns to fight." Nancy smiled weakly. "Then maybe we're both still wrestling." He looked at her, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. "Nancy, I've lost almost everything because of this. My comfort, my peace, even my name. But I'd do it again." She turned to him. "Why?" "Because you reminded me what kind of man I wanted to be." Their silence said what words could not. Not romance yet, something deeper, shared scars, mutual fire. Weeks later, a Commission for Environmental Justice was established, the Ndlovu Foundation, co-founded by Nancy and Reginald. Its mission: rebuild the damaged river communities, offer legal aid to the poor, and educate youth about environmental and civic responsibility. At the launch ceremony, journalists gathered under white tents. Children sang freedom songs. Nancy stood on stage, her mother in the front row wiping tears. In her speech, Nancy said, "This foundation is not built on victory, but on memory. The memory of every voice that was silenced, every dream that drowned, every mother who buried a child because greed ruled the land. We are not here to celebrate power. We are here to redefine it." The applause was thunderous. Reginald joined her at the podium. Together they unveiled a mural painted by local artists, showing the river reborn, flowing pure again, with the faces of the people reflected in its waters. The mural's inscription read, "Justice is the river that never forgets its source." Months passed. Nancy returned to teaching part-time at the law university, training a new generation of advocates. Reginald rebuilt his business, now driven by transparency and social impact. One afternoon, he visited her class unannounced. The students whispered excitedly, "That's him, the tech guy who went to court." When class ended, Nancy joined him outside under the mango trees. "You came without warning," she said, smiling. "I wanted to see if you're still terrifying in person," he teased. They laughed, softly, easily, as though the city had exhaled after years of holding its breath. As they walked toward the courtyard, a young girl ran up to Nancy. Miss Okafor, she said shyly, holding out a drawing. It showed Nancy standing in front of a crowd, the words, "Justice for All," above her head. Nancy crouched, touched the girl's cheek. "What's your name, my dear?" "Chica," she said. "I want to be like you." Nancy's throat tightened. "No, Chica," she said softly. "Be better." Reginald watched her, and in that moment, he knew. The story wasn't about courtrooms or verdicts anymore. It was about what came after. The courage to keep walking when applause fades. That evening, as the sun dipped over Nauru City, Nancy and Reginald drove to the riverbank where the first protests had begun. The water now flowed clearer. Fishermen waved from their boats. Children played by the shore. Nancy took a small jar from her bag, filled with the dark, polluted water she had collected months ago at the start of the case. She uncorked it slowly and poured it into the river. "Let the past return to its source," she whispered. Reginald nodded, "and let the future find its own current." They stood there as the last light turned the river gold. Around them, the city pulsed, wounded but alive, flawed but awakening. Above them, a billboard flickered with the image of Baraka's mansion being repurposed into a public library. Beneath it, graffiti read, "Even giants must kneel when truth stands tall." Nancy smiled faintly. "Do you think he'll ever change?" Reginald shrugged. "Maybe not, but the city did." As the camera of fate pulled back, from the river to the city, from the city to the continent, one voice lingered in the wind. In Nauru City, power once belonged to the rich. But then a woman with no gold and a man with no peace taught it something money could never buy, a conscience. And somewhere deep in the heart of Africa, a mother whispered her daughter's name with pride, Nancy Okafor, the one who made the law remember its soul. The rain fell on Nauru City that night, soft at first, like a whisper from heaven, then harder, as though the skies themselves wanted to cleanse the streets of every lie and every wound the city had endured. Neon lights shimmered through the downpour, turning puddles into pools of gold and ash. Nancy Okafor stood on the courthouse steps, drenched but unbroken. Around her the people cheered, voices rising like a song of freedom that had been silenced too long. Some held banners with her name. Others simply raised their hands to the heavens, thanking God that for once, the poor had won. Reginald Mensah stepped beside her, his suit soaked, his eyes gleaming with a quiet pride that words couldn't express. The verdict against Chief Baraka Nwodo had shaken the entire nation, guilty on all counts: embezzlement, murder by conspiracy, and human rights violations. The mighty had fallen, and justice had finally found its voice. Yet amid the triumph, Nancy felt something deeper than victory, a quiet sorrow for what justice costs. For every name written in the judgment, there were others lost in silence. Friends who vanished, truths that nearly died. The courtroom lights might have turned off, but the real battle, the one for the soul of Nauru City, had only begun. Baraka's empire crumbled like dry clay. His property seized, his statues torn down, his loyalists turning on each other for survival. But even in disgrace, his shadow lingered, in boardrooms, in government corridors, in whispers of men who still believed that power was a birthright. Nancy knew that this victory was only a door opened, not the final step through it. That night, she and Reginald visited the old quarter, where it all began. The slums of Makoko Rise, where children once ran barefoot through muddy streets and mothers traded coins for rice. Now streetlights burned again, powered by Reginald's new community initiative, the Dawn Project, a foundation born from the same pain that once divided them. Nancy paused by a mural painted on the cracked wall, her face beside the scales of justice. With the words, "Truth is the seed that survives the storm," she smiled, though tears mixed with the rain. "I didn't do this alone," she whispered. Reginald placed his hand on her shoulder. "You planted the seed, Nancy. The rest of us just followed the light." A moment of silence passed, deep, reverent. Then, in the distance, the call of a night watchman echoed through the streets, and the rain softened into mist. In that stillness, Nancy thought of Baraka, not as the monster the world now saw, but as a warning. A man who believed wealth could cage justice, who forgot that every wall of corruption eventually collapses under its own weight. His fall was more than a punishment. It was a reminder that a city's greatness is not in its towers, but in the hearts that dare to stay clean when everything around them turns dark. She turned to Reginald. Do you think Nuru will ever heal? He looked toward the skyline, the lights flickering through the fog. Healing takes time, he said softly, but tonight it has begun. And as they walked away, hand in hand, the city behind them seemed to breathe again, street by street, heart by heart. The rain washed away the dust of fear, and dawn crept across the horizon, breaking through the last of the night. For Nuru City had learned that justice is not a story of revenge, but of redemption, and every name written in pain can one day be rewritten in hope. When the storm ends, what remains is not silence. It is the echo of every voice that dared to speak the truth. And in that echo, new stories begin. This was only the beginning of Nuru City's rebirth. But every dawn casts new shadows. As the people celebrate, forces in the dark prepare their next move. A new figure rises from Baraka's fallen empire, and Nancy's next case will test her soul in ways she never imagined. Stay with us for the next episode of Black African Tales, The Price of Light. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter in our journey through justice, courage, and redemption.